Hello again, my dudes. This is Kadima again with another build video for Dragon's Dogma 2, this time using the Sorcerer vocation. Now, Sorcerers are extremely fun to use, and although they are very squishy and vulnerable, and once they start taking damage, it's kind of hard to stop that from happening because you'll just get staggered and knocked down quite easily. When it comes to damage output, they are absolute beasts when it comes to doing damage, especially if you have two sorcerers in your party, because this will increase your casting speed if you are casting the same spell simultaneously. It also gets a little bit of a benefit from doing that. Let's first have a look at the status. I'm currently level 97. My strength is absolutely a joke, 507, because being a sorcerer you don't really need strength at all. Defense is 716. Not bad, but that's not where the real problem is. I'm going to explain to you in a minute. Magic is 1087. It's not great, but it's good. Magic defense is 915, which is absolutely crazy. Knockdown power 220, which is a bit rubbish, but as a spellcaster, you don't really have much to go knocking people down with. Your priority is to do damage. As a sorcerer, that's all you care about, and doing as much damage as fast as possible. That's what the goal is as a sorcerer. Don't worry so much about casting a spell that is going to do a tremendous amount of damage, is if you are going to be vulnerable and unable to cast anything after that, or if it takes a long time to cast anything after that. I don't think that's the way to go when using a sorcerer. Yes, you can make use of the big spells, and they can be useful in certain situations, but when it comes to big monsters, there are other ways to do more damage in quick succession using the sorcerer exclusively. Knockdown resistance is 110, and that's why you have to try to stay away from physical combat. Keep your distance, cast your spells. If enemies by some reason go for you, which unfortunately in some of the footage they do, because my warrior is a bit of a mess. He doesn't really go for the enemies. I think there's a thing in the unmoored world that the longer you stay here, the more pawns become a bit crazy and they don't really do what they're meant to do. And I am on the last day in the unmoored world, as I'm running out of days to do my build videos. But you will see that I get exposed more often than I should, because the warrior is not particularly doing his thing. As for the skills to use when using a sorcerer, there are plenty of ways to go with this. I am just suggesting my own approach and how I find it not only easier, but uh, more manageable in terms of resources, and also when it comes to damage output, what I believe works the best. There are other ways to do a tremendous amount of damage with sorcerers. There are plenty of ways, but when you are playing as the sorcerer, I think this is the best way to go for it. Now, for spells, I'm using High Flagration as the number one source of damage. The reason why I'm using High Flagration is when you have certain skills and certain rings equipped, your spell casting is going to be stupidly fast. I mean, you can cast this in less than 1 second. Not like in the video. The video takes a tremendous amount of time to cast Flagration. You can actually nearly instantly cast it. And you can actually instantly cast it with high spell hold. And I'm going to explain to you why you want to have high spell hold in this build. Um, as for the big damage spell, I prefer using Maelstrom. The reason why I don't go with the Meteoron, two things. In caves, this thing doesn't work. Because there's no room for the meteors to fall from the sky, this doesn't work. And the Maelstrom will work as long as the room where you are casting is just big enough for the cyclone to take place. If you are in a tight space in a cavern, this will also not work. I've tried, it doesn't work. Same thing for Meteoron. The difference is, however, Meteoron is fire-based damage. I already have fire-based damage from my Flagration, so there's no need to have two sources of fire damage. Yes, they knock everything down and they destroy everything, but the casting time is tremendous. Maelstrom takes the exact same casting time, but the difference is this is not fire damage, so I'm not repeating sources of damage. The other thing is this actually sucks enemies in, as in the Meteoron, the although this will aim at the targets, as soon as the first target dies, the other meteorons not necessarily will aim at the remaining targets when we're talking about small enemies or groups of enemies. So they tend to be a little bit wasted sometimes. As you can see in the video, the first meteoron killed everyone, true, but then all the other meteorons were landing on nothing. As in the Maelstrom, you kill the first group of enemies. If there are still enemies around trying to reach you, they will end up getting into the cyclone, getting sucked into it, and lose HP and eventually die as well. So I think for those reasons, Maelstrom is a better choice. Keep in mind, however, it does not do as much damage as the meteorons will if all the meteors land, but on the long term, I think this is a preferable skill, especially with the type of build and how we are planning to use it. Now, last but not least, we have the Augural Flare. The Augural Flare is the one thing to combine with high Flagration and with high Spell Hold. So the way you want to use Augural Flare is you want to cast Augural Flare to, if you can cast it to a weak point, great. But if you can't, don't worry too much. Just cast it to a place where you and your other pawns, such as the warrior, can reach. If you cast onto, for example, a Cyclops head, yes, that's great. It's on the weak spot, but then you won't be able to reach it because even if you just use the normal bolts from tapping square with the sorcerer, they will not aim at the weak spot. As I explained with my archer build, quick fire does not aim at weak spots. It aims at whatever part of the body is closer to you. So if you cast, for example, if you're fighting a Cyclops and you cast the Augural Flare onto its leg, for example, you can then use high flagration onto that leg, which will not only set him on fire, but will also add to the explosions with the Augural Flare. Now, if the warrior you have in your party is also targeting that leg, or if your other sorcerer in your party is targeting that leg or somewhere near that leg, that will help up building all the explosions and all the damage you can for the Augural Flare to do as much explosive damage as possible once the explosions start taking place. That's why I prefer to go that way. When it comes to a dragon, you can actually try to aim it at the heart. It works. But I would recommend you do the Augural Flare on the heart when the dragon is already knocked down. So if you first aim at the legs to get him knocked down, you'll probably get a bit better results with that. When it comes to the augments, I am using Disparity because it increases the likelihood of inflicting debilitations with your attacks. In this case, we want the targets to get set on fire. I am using the Catalysis, which increases the damage dealt when exploding a hostile target element, no weakness. So if your enemies are weak to fire, you will do increased damage. If not, well, it's not great because the only source of elemental damage I'm using is fire, but it's good to have, but don't play around this. You can play around this with a different kind of build, and as I said, sorcerers are very versatile. You can come up with different builds. I just like to use it this way as it's my personal preference. Sagacity augments your magic. Doesn't necessarily have to be here. You can replace it with something else, such as increasing your knockdown resistance or whatever. I want to have just as much damage as possible, as I explained. So this will help increase the damage per explosion and the damage of the sagacity, of the flagration, I mean, and the damage of the cyclone. So all those things put together, it does a big increase of damage in the end. Lethality increases damage dealt when striking a target's vitals. Again, you will not always be striking the vitals, but when you do, the explosions are going to be big and destroy everything. Subtlety, because as a sorcerer, you really don't want to be the target of foes. This helps Not always. Again, it will help more if your warrior had the opposite, which makes him the target of the enemies. Unfortunately, the one I'm using doesn't seem to have that. Oh ho. And last but not least, you want to have Zeal because it reduces the stamina cost consumed when performing skills. So this will help with all skills combined. You could easily replace Sagacity, for example, with increased stamina regeneration if you want. Um, and for that, you would go with Exaltation. I don't think uh, sorcerers really need this skill
Had to assist.
because, in all honesty,
Always a
you can
pleasure.
just hold triangle as like this and you will recover your stamina. So because there is a way to recover stamina without necessarily having to waste an augment slot, uh, I don't think this is extremely necessary. Again, when it comes to my party selection, let me call them to me if they feel like coming. I'm using Gandalf as my healer, of course, and as usual, I have him as my main pawn. Noel happens to be the second sorcerer,
Arisen.
um,
I should have
and
expected you may yet linger.
he's okay as a sorcerer, not great, but okay. We combine okay together. Khal Drogo, this guy, I mean, I was expecting a bit better from him. He's not doing great when it comes to target being the target of pawns. I mean, um, he should have the the augment that uh, allows him to be the target. He doesn't. So whoever you are, owner of Khal Drogo, I would suggest you put him as the target because it would facilitate everybody's builds working properly. In terms of his skills, he's actually okay, but it's the augments that would help here. And I just didn't have the patience to look for a warrior or a fighter that had that just for the sake of the build video. When it comes to equipment, which is the last thing I want to talk about, is I'm using Dragon's Wilt. Of course, magic is as high as 1087. Again, nothing else really matters when using a sorcerer, it's just the magic. I'm using the Visage of Janua, which I actually am doing it just for the sake of the style. There are other pieces of equipment that do a little bit more defense and magic defense. Not so much when it comes to debilitations or elemental resistance. This actually covers pretty much everything, just a little bit, 5, 4, 8%, not big numbers. But it's more of a style choice. I like how the crown makes me look like I'm Sauron from Lord of the Rings. Uh, Silhouette of Sorcery, this is definitely the best body armor piece you can get for the Sorcerer. Legs, Runic Gaiters, again, the best you can get for Sorcerers. Cloak, as usual, Champion's Mantle. There's no way I'm letting go of this. Now, when it comes to the rings, this is where I am able to cast Flagration in less than 1 second. Not only you have the core skill quick spell, which by holding R1 your spell will be cast faster, but the ring with articulacy and the ring of recitation, which unfortunately will reduce your help in about 20%. But with these two together, you get an increased casting speed of about 45%, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, you will near instantly cast the flare and nearly instantly cast flagration. So that will help on the long run. Now let me give you a few examples on how to use this build and try to make the best out of it with Indian Moored World. Alright, first example here, we're gonna go with a dragon, which is the very last dragon I could find in the Unmoored World for me, as I am really running out of dragons. This is the last one. Now, again, I'm starting with a Cyclone just because I'm far away, and I saw that the other sorcerer was going for the Meteor as well. So if he's going for one and I go for the other, we both start doing a good amount of damage straight away. Now, unfortunately, the dragons are resistant to fire damage, which in this case is not great because Flagration will be my main source of damage, and he will not be getting set on fire. Obvious reasons, being a dragon and all that. When using the Sorcerer, always remember, especially against dragon, to try to avoid their spells, because you'll get stunned. I managed to do it the first time. I actually think I got hit the second time. You see me here trying to conjure the augural flare, which I did on the heart, but then I got hit just when I was about to cast Flagration, which kind of ruined it for me. In the meantime, my sorcerer decided to go with another meteor, which is great. And as you can see, I managed to get the flare going, but on his shoulder, which is not a great location because I will not be able to hit him there. I tried to casting Augural Flare again, but the dragon decided that I needed a little bit of shock therapy, and unfortunately my Gandalf is casting his thing. It didn't really care about getting me back up. When I finally managed to cast the Augural Flare on his face, I cast Flagration, and this is when the magic takes place, because I finally get to target the flare, and boom, dragon is dead. Yes, setting up is complicated. It requires a lot of managing, but it works. Again, group of people, group of enemies, and also there's a boss up the hill. So we're gonna go with the Cyclone first, to try to target as many of the small ones right from the start. I was hoping more of them would fall Khal Drogo down, but they didn't. Again, he doesn't really call enemies to him. In any case, I did get rid of a few of them, and I was already damaging the big guy. In the meantime, you see I'm casting Flare, trying to get the Flare onto his leg, so I can then target the leg. I finally managed. I go with the spell hold Flagration that I already prepared prior to starting the fight. I burn his leg, and then I just wait. Boom, 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 boom. He's dead. Easy job with the big guy. He died basically instantly, even though his leg is not a weak spot. The Augural Flare combined with the Flagration, every tick of Flagration will help the explosion damage. It makes it very easy to use. Now, next example, I was actually going to aim at that big ogre there, and I didn't realize the phantom guy had already aggroed my party. So, unfortunately, we were up for a tough fight because goblins also decided to join in. So I'm trying to cast the flare onto the phantom guy so I can use the flagration, which I managed to do, just so I can get some damage going on him already. He's not going to be set on fire because he's a ghost for obvious reasons, but you can see all the explosions doing that lovely nice bit of damage. It was not a perfect one because I didn't manage to hit all of it. Unfortunately, Khal Drogo was proving himself useful again by allowing all the big ogre to jump on top of us. Not just me, but the other sorcerer and Gandalf as well. I was trying to get the ogre set on fire while I used the Augural Flare on his leg, and he is gone. Pretty much nearly done. 2 HP bars completely destroyed. Again, not even aiming at a weak spot, just on his leg. And then we finally managed to burn him to a crisp, while all the goblins were surrounding us and giving us a hard time. And then the phantom guy decided that I needed some proper ass whooping, and he just did exactly that. He put me down and he wiped my floor with the floor with my character. I asked Gandalf for some heal, but the guy was really not letting go. Khal Drogo was not aggroing the phantom guy. He kept coming for me. This is the problem with having a warrior without the augment that makes him the target, or the ring that makes him the target. In any case, my other sorcerer decided to go with Meteor, which is good, but then he got to be the target of the Phantom's Rage. I cast Augural Flare and then immediately go with Flagration again. I managed to do a few ticks, but then he decided to move. In any case, those ticks were quite good enough to get some explosions going. I got some more Flagration on the go, but that is of course not enough damage. You need to combine it with the Augural Flare, which I finally do. I cast him on his back while he's distracted with Gandalf, and then I finally managed to get enough ticks for the explosion to get the job done. And that's it. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave any comments down below. Subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheerio!